I can go back to my own life, and I thought I'd be doing production and editing my whole life. And when my dad died, I knew I was supposed to step into this other door.
For years, Joel Osteen has smiled from television screens while millions called him America's pastor. But what if the man who preached that every setback is temporary has spent decades surrounded by controversies that refuse to disappear? A hurricane that sparked accusations of closing church doors to flood victims, hundreds of thousands of dollars mysteriously hidden inside a church wall, a multi-million-dollar government loan during a national crisis, and a shooting that shattered the sanctuary, meant to represent hope. This is not the polished Sunday version of the Joel Osteen story. It is the complicated, controversial rise of a reluctant preacher whose legacy may divide America forever. The controversies that wouldn't go away. Public scrutiny followed Joel Osteen into nearly every corner of his life. One of the earliest major controversies involved Victoria Osteen. In December 2005, while boarding a Continental Airlines flight from Houston to Colorado, a dispute erupted over a stain on the armrest of her first-class seat. What began as a customer complaint escalated into accusations that she had pushed and struck a flight attendant. The Federal Aviation Administration fined Victoria $3,000 for interfering with a flight crew member, and a civil lawsuit followed seeking substantial damages. The case drew national attention, with testimony becoming increasingly dramatic. After days of courtroom proceedings, the jury found in Victoria's favor and awarded no damages. Legally, the Osteens had won, but the episode reinforced perceptions of celebrity privilege among some critics. Far more significant were the theological controversies surrounding Joel's preaching. Prominent theologians accused him of presenting a watered-down version of Christianity that emphasized personal success and emotional encouragement, while avoiding difficult subjects such as sin, repentance, sacrifice, and judgment. Dr. Michael Horton famously described Joel's message as a cotton candy gospel, sweet and appealing, but lacking theological substance. Pastor John MacArthur went even further, repeatedly accusing Joel of replacing biblical doctrine with self-improvement and prosperity teaching. Hank Hanegraaff argued that Joel had become the leading symbol of a consumer-oriented Christianity, focused more on personal happiness than historic Christian faith. The defining moment came during a 2005 appearance on Larry King Live. When asked directly whether non-Christians could be saved, Joel hesitated. Instead of offering a clear theological declaration, he spoke about not wanting to judge another person's eternal destiny and mentioned sincere believers he had met in other religions. The interview spread rapidly across television and the internet. 5 days later, Joel issued a statement affirming that he believed eternal life comes through Jesus Christ, and acknowledging that he had not expressed that conviction clearly during the interview. Yet the controversy never fully disappeared. Similar questions resurfaced repeatedly in later media appearances, and critics continue to accuse him of avoiding doctrinal clarity in order to remain broadly appealing. Joel consistently defended his approach by arguing that people already carry enough guilt and discouragement before coming to church. His purpose, he said, was not to condemn them further, but to remind them that tomorrow could be better than today. Even when labeled a prosperity gospel preacher, he insisted that prosperity included peace, health, strong families, and purposeful living, not merely financial wealth. This tension became one of the defining paradoxes of his ministry. Millions found genuine comfort in his optimistic message, while millions of others believed that message had abandoned essential elements of historic Christianity. Through it all, Joel rarely changed his tone. He continued preaching hope, resilience, and new beginnings, even as the debate over his theology grew increasingly intense. Hurricane Harvey and the Wall of Money. If theological criticism challenged Joel Osteen's preaching, Hurricane Harvey challenged his leadership. In August 2017, catastrophic flooding devastated Houston after the storm dumped more than 60 inches of rain across parts of the metropolitan area. Entire neighborhoods disappeared underwater, and tens of thousands of families were displaced. As the disaster unfolded, many people naturally looked toward Lakewood Church, a massive former sports arena capable of holding nearly 17,000 people. On August 27th, Lakewood announced that the church was inaccessible because of severe flooding and directed displaced residents to other shelters. Within hours, local residents began posting photos and videos appearing to show the building standing dry while much of Houston remained underwater. The images spread across social media with extraordinary speed, and a furious backlash erupted. journalists, commentators, and ordinary citizens asked why America's largest church was not immediately opening its doors to flood victims. Lakewood insisted that portions of the property, including parking areas, had flooded, and that officials had not initially requested the church as a shelter because other facilities still had capacity. Joel later argued that bringing thousands of evacuees into the building before conditions were fully understood could have created additional danger. On August 29th, Lakewood officially began sheltering evacuees, and hundreds of volunteers arrived to help. Approximately 300 people eventually found refuge inside the church. Joel later admitted that, with hindsight, he would have prepared the facility sooner and stationed staff there before the storm intensified. But by then, public perception had largely hardened. The controversy became even more painful because another Houston figure, furniture store owner Jim Mattress Mac McIngvale, had immediately opened his stores to displaced families and was widely celebrated for his spontaneous generosity. The comparison was unavoidable. One man became the symbol of eventually attracting tens of millions of followers across Facebook. National debate about megachurch wealth and moral responsibility. As if that controversy were not strange enough, an even more bizarre story emerged years later. In 2014, Lakewood reported that approximately $600,000 in cash and checks had disappeared from a church safe. The theft remained unsolved for years. Then, in November 2021, a plumber repairing a loose toilet in a public restroom discovered hundreds of envelopes filled with cash, checks, and money orders hidden inside a wall. Investigators concluded that the envelopes were likely connected to the 2014 theft and had somehow remained trapped inside the wall cavity for more than 7 years. The discovery raised extraordinary questions. Who hid the money? Why was it placed inside the wall? How had it remained undiscovered for so long in one of the busiest churches in America? Because the statute of limitations had expired, criminal prosecution was effectively impossible, even if the thief were identified. There was never any evidence suggesting Joel Osteen's involvement, yet once again his name appeared beside headlines that sounded more like a mystery novel than real life. The image of church donations spilling from a bathroom wall became another unforgettable symbol attached to his ministry, the son who never wanted the pulpit. Long before Joel Osteen became one of the most recognizable religious figures in the world, he was simply the fourth child of John and Dodie Osteen. Growing up in Houston, Texas, ministry surrounded him from the moment he was born. His father had transformed a tiny congregation meeting in an abandoned feed store into what would eventually become Lakewood Church, a rapidly growing charismatic ministry that drew thousands of worshippers every week. John Osteen's life was filled with dramatic turns. Originally a Southern Baptist minister, he experienced a profound spiritual transformation after his infant daughter, Lisa, suffered a severe medical condition that doctors believed resembled cerebral palsy. That crisis pushed him toward charismatic Christianity and convinced him that divine healing and miracles were still possible in the modern world. In 1959, he founded Lakewood Church with only about 90 attendees, never imagining it would become America's largest congregation. Joel grew up watching this extraordinary expansion. He saw crowds increase, buildings become larger, and his father gained national influence through television broadcasting. Yet, unlike his siblings, many of whom embraced public ministry, Joel avoided the spotlight. After graduating from Humble High School in 1981, he enrolled at Oral Roberts University to study radio and television communications, not theology. His passion was media production, not preaching. He left college after a single semester and returned to Houston in 1982 to help develop Lakewood's television ministry. For the next 17 years, he worked behind the scenes, operating cameras, editing broadcasts, and directing programming that carried his father's sermons into homes across America and eventually around the world. Those years were crucial because they taught him how television could shape emotion and influence millions of viewers. What makes this chapter remarkable is that Joel repeatedly refused opportunities to preach. His mother preached. His sister Lisa preached. Guest ministers filled the platform regularly. Joel always said no. He felt comfortable in the control room, not behind the pulpit. According to the church, he served faithfully in media and business operations, helping someone else's vision succeed, rather than preparing to inherit a global ministry. During those hidden years, another important story unfolded. Joel met Victoria at her family's jewelry store while getting a watch battery replaced. They married in 1987 and eventually welcomed 2 children, Jonathan and Alexandra. The quiet producer was building a family life while remaining almost invisible to the congregation that would one day look to him for leadership. By the late 1990s, nothing about Joel's life suggested he was destined to become the face of one of the world's largest churches. He had spent nearly 2 decades avoiding the stage, convinced that God had called him to support the ministry from behind the camera rather than stand beneath the lights himself. The week that changed everything. Sometimes a person's destiny changes in a single week. By early 1999, Joel Osteen was struggling with serious heart and kidney problems. Even from his hospital bed, his greatest concern was the future of Lakewood Church. Once again, he asked Joel to preach in his place. Once again, Joel initially refused. Then something unexpected happened. Only minutes after saying no, Joel called his father back and agreed to preach. On January 17, 1999, at 35 years old, he stepped onto the platform for the first time before nearly 6,000 people. He later admitted that he was terrified. Before the service began, he put on a pair of his father's shoes, hoping they would somehow give him confidence. While Joel preached, John listened through a telephone connection from his hospital room. Nurses later told Joel they had never seen his father so happy. His face reportedly glowed with pride throughout the sermon. 6 days later, on January 23, 1999, Joel Osteen died of a heart attack at the age of 77. The timing felt almost impossible to comprehend. For 17 years, Joel had resisted every invitation to preach, yet he had agreed to stand behind the pulpit on the final Sunday of his father's life. Looking back, he often described it as something that felt far beyond coincidence. Even after the funeral, however, Joel did not feel prepared to become Lakewood's next pastor. He later spoke about the intense inner conflict he experienced. One voice urged him to step forward and lead the congregation. Another insisted that he was not a preacher. The doubt was understandable. His father had spent 40 years becoming one of America's most respected charismatic ministers, while Joel had spent 17 years directing cameras and editing broadcasts. When he was formally installed as senior pastor on October 3, 1999, with Victoria serving as co-pastor, many wondered whether the quiet producer could possibly fill the enormous void left by the church's founder. During his early months in leadership, Joel made what seemed like the obvious choice. He tried to become his father. He copied John's cadence, energy, gestures, and preaching style, believing that honoring his father's legacy meant sounding exactly like him. But every sermon felt unnatural. The breakthrough came when he reflected on Acts 13:36, which says that David served God's purpose in his own generation. Joel later described sensing a simple message in his heart: "Your dad fulfilled his purpose. Now go be you." That realization changed everything. He stopped trying to imitate Joel Osteen and embraced his own personality. His sermons became conversational rather than confrontational, calm rather than thunderous. Instead of emphasizing judgment and repentance, he focused on hope, healing, resilience, and the belief that setbacks could become new beginnings. Some longtime followers were skeptical, but countless others were drawn to this gentler approach. Families who had never attended church began filling the sanctuary. Viewers who might never have listened to traditional preaching found themselves captivated by a pastor who spoke about possibility instead of condemnation. Without intending to, Joel Osteen accomplished something extraordinary. He did not become a second Joel Osteen. He became the first Joel Osteen, building America's largest church. Once Joel embraced his own voice, Lakewood Church entered a completely new era. Growth accelerated so rapidly that the 8,000-seat sanctuary, completed in 1988, could no longer contain the crowds gathering each weekend. Overflow rooms became routine, and it was clear the church needed a dramatically larger home. The solution arrived from an unlikely place. In 2001, Houston approved a 30-year lease, allowing Lakewood to move into the former Compaq Center, the 16,800-seat arena where the Houston Rockets had played for decades. The transformation required enormous faith and enormous money. Lakewood committed nearly $100 million to renovate the facility, financing most of the project through a massive Bank of America loan. When the doors opened in July 2005, more than 56,000 people attended the dedication weekend. The former sports arena had become America's largest church, hosting multiple English and Spanish services each week and drawing well over 40,000 worshippers regularly. What had begun with 90 people in an abandoned feed store had become the largest congregation in the United States. Joel's influence expanded far beyond Houston. Lakewood's television ministry evolved into a global media network, with broadcasts reaching more than 100 million households and viewers in over 100 countries. Social media multiplied that reach even further, eventually attracting tens of millions of followers across Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. At the same time, Joel became a publishing phenomenon. His 2004 book, Your Best Life Now, debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, remained there for more than 2 years, and sold over 8 million copies worldwide. The success transformed him from a Houston pastor into an international inspirational brand. Book after book followed the same pattern. Become a better you, it's your time. Every day. A Friday, I Declare, The Power of I Am, and Think Better, Live Better all became major bestsellers. Altogether, he authored more than 25 books, including Pray Bold and Chosen in 2025. With that success came enormous wealth and enormous scrutiny. In 2005, Joel announced that he would stop accepting his annual $200,000 salary from Lakewood and would instead support himself through book royalties, speaking engagements, and other media ventures. He later explained that this had always been his dream, to serve the church without depending on church salary. Ironically, the decision intensified public curiosity about his finances. Estimates of his net worth climbed toward $100 million, though such figures remain difficult to verify. What could be verified was his lifestyle. In 2010, Joel and Victoria purchased a 17,000 square foot estate in Houston's exclusive River Oaks neighborhood for approximately $10.5 million, while also retaining ownership of their previous multi-million-dollar home. Supporters argued that these homes reflected the success of an author whose books had reached millions. Critics saw them as symbols of a pastor preaching hope while living among Houston's elite. Questions about Lakewood's financial transparency grew louder because churches are not required to publish the detailed disclosures expected of many non-profit organizations. By the mid-2010s, Joel Osteen had become something unprecedented in American Christianity. A megachurch pastor, media celebrity, best-selling author, and global brand all at the same time. But the greater his influence became, the more intensely the world examined the man behind the smile. Tragedy, survival, and an unfinished legacy. The final years of Joel Osteen's story have been marked by both controversy and tragedy. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Lakewood received a $4.4 million Paycheck Protection Program loan intended to protect the salaries and health insurance of approximately 368 employees, while in-person services were suspended. Although the loan was legally obtained under federal rules, public reaction was fierce. Many Americans questioned whether one of the nation's largest and most prosperous churches should accept millions in taxpayer-funded relief. The hashtag tax the churches spread rapidly across social media. Lakewood eventually announced that it would repay the entire loan rather than seek forgiveness, ending the financial controversy, but not the broader debate about wealth and public trust. Then, on February 11, 2024, something far more devastating happened. Shortly before the transition between Lakewood's English and Spanish services, a 36-year-old woman entered the church carrying an AR-15 style rifle and another firearm. She opened fire inside the building before being confronted by 2 off-duty law enforcement officers working church security. The shooter was killed, but the deepest heartbreak involved her 7-year-old son, who was struck in the head during the exchange and suffered catastrophic injuries. A 57-year-old church attendee was also wounded. Investigators later confirmed that the woman had a documented history of severe mental illness, including schizophrenia, yet had legally purchased the rifle only weeks earlier. When Joel appeared before reporters that afternoon, the familiar smile that had become his trademark was gone. He spoke with visible grief, thanking the officers whose rapid response likely prevented an even greater massacre. For a pastor who had spent decades describing church as a place of hope, seeing gunfire erupt inside his own sanctuary was a devastating reminder that even sacred spaces are not immune from human tragedy. Yet Joel did not retreat from public life. In 2024, he became emotional while announcing that Lakewood had finally paid off the $100 million loan used to transform the former Compaq Center into America's largest church. The moment represented the completion of a vision that had begun with his father in a tiny feed store 65 years earlier. Throughout 2025 and 2026, he continued preaching weekly, broadcasting globally, and publishing new books. Even when comedian Drusky released a viral parody of megachurch culture, Joel responded with characteristic calm, simply saying, "It was funny." He also dismissed many extravagant rumors about private jets, yachts, and fleets of luxury cars, insisting that people often invent stories about his wealth. More than 25 years after reluctantly taking his father's pulpit, Joel Osteen remains one of the world's most recognized pastors, admired for spreading hope and criticized for commercializing Christianity, he has inspired extraordinary devotion and controversy alike. The former television producer became a global religious figure whose legacy is still being debated. Joel Osteen's story is far more complicated than the smiling preacher seen on television. It is a story of reluctant leadership, extraordinary success, fierce criticism, public controversy, and heartbreaking tragedy. Whether you believe he is a genuine source of hope or a symbol of modern megachurch excess, his impact on American Christianity cannot be ignored. The debate surrounding his life is unlikely to end anytime soon, because every new headline seems to add another layer to an already remarkable legacy. If this deep dive changed the way you see Joel Osteen, make sure to like and subscribe for more controversial stories that others are afraid to tell.